What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs in our season preview series, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button, help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more football content in your life, just hit that big red subscribe button. Tell me what you think about Kansas City. How big of a loss do you think Tyreek Hill weighs on this offense? How many wins do you think they come away with? Who are some X factors and some games you're looking forward to watching the Chiefs play this year? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about Kansas City down below. If you're new to the series, welcome to it. Be sure to go check out our older videos, but let's jump right into it. Win range, 11-13 wins. Right now I got them at 11-5, tied for second in the AFC West, right there with Denver, and a game behind the Chargers. But dude, that division is going to be crazy. If you missed my AFC West record predictions video, I have all four teams hitting double-digit wins. We'll see if that stays the case in my updated version of the video, which will come out on the day of game one between the Bills and Rams. But the AFC West, it's been talked about a lot, and for good reason. So it's gonna be a dogfight till the very end. But now that you kind of got an idea for my win range, my projected win total, I'll kind of go position group by position group, get a feel for where I stand on this roster. Obviously Patrick Mahomes over the last 3 years, probably the best quarterback in the league. Just looking at that sample, I know Aaron Rodgers has the two MVP awards to go with it, but you're talking about a guy who was the first ever Super Bowl champion and league MVP before the age of 25 at the quarterback position. Simply put, he's doing stuff that just has not been done before, and a little bit of a bump in the road last year with how defenses were adjusting to try to contain the Chiefs' offense. But I think this year you're going to see a little bit of a resurgence in who and how we see Patrick Mahomes, and it's just going to look a little different. But I think individual grades or team performance record, whatever you look at, I think you're going to see the Chiefs towards the top of the NFL in every pretty much offensive category, specifically through the air. And I think Patrick Mahomes can be right back in the conversation for maybe being the most talented quarterback in the league. Not that I think that he's far behind or lost a lot of ground there, but anyways, moving on, running back room, that's kind of an interesting spot. Ronald Jones is a pretty good, solid, pure runner, and you pair him up with the pass catching ability of CEH, who has been a little bit of a disappointment, and you look at him being drafted in the first round and some of the holes that kind of opened up there over the next year or two for the Chiefs, kind of feels like a regrettable decision, but there's still time for him to turn that around. So I'm interested to see how that running back committee and that share splits out. I would figure to see CEH used as the passing guy, and then Ronald Jones maybe as the early down back, getting a lot of when you actually hand it off, that's Ronald Jones. The offensive line's one of the best in the league. Really the only spot maybe for concern is over at right tackle, but Austin Wiley's been there for a while, and you also have Lucas Niang, you also have Darian Kinnard, and Darian Kinnard's also an interesting piece in the mix because one, great draft value in the 5th round, totally saw him as a day 2 prospect, but could he be the guy who steps in at left tackle? I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, 6'5", 315. Man, if you add another 5-10 pounds of muscle over the course of this year, and the Chiefs don't decide to keep Orlando Brown around, you might have, a guy waiting in the wings to be his replacement. Now, that being said, I also think he could factor in at that right tackle spot. We'll see how the rest of the training camp shakes out, but that's going to be an interesting battle. Lucas Niang, going into year 3, can he take that leap forward and become a starter at right tackle? You'd like to think that he could, but, even if it's Wiley, that's solid, stable. The other 4/5 of the offensive line are all above average, so you're in a great spot there if you're Kansas City. And then the wide receiver position, of course, has been a huge point of conversation. No more Tyreek Hill, but I think this team added a ton when it comes to yak production with Juju Smith-Schuster. He's hard to bring down. Sky Moore we'll talk about later on. He could do a lot of different things, including what he does as a yak weapon. Very shifty after the catch. So I think they might be able to gain a little bit more to where if defenses are going to continue to play too high, cover 4, cover 2 against him, and try to keep the ball in front of them, all right, fine. We'll get him the ball in the hands of a Sky Moore or a Juju Smith-Schuster and bring them down. Have your corners make a play. And that's kind of an interesting component. Also, Juju and Sky Moore both have the capabilities of doing a lot over the middle of the field. Specifically, Juju, I think he's a guy pretty comfortably. You can have him live at the sticks, find soft spots in the zone, and he's just another intermediate factor. And, of course, you have to talk about Travis Kelce, maybe the best tight end in football. Dude's a freak. What more needs to be said? MVS, too, also still gives you that downfield speed. So if teams do pivot away from that, that too high way of playing Kansas City, MVS still has that downfield ability to get open and create big plays. So there's still that, component within the offense, just maybe not as, reliable or maybe not as flashy as it was with Tyreek Hill. And then you get to the defense, and, we'll talk about this defensive line in a little bit. It's an interesting group. I'm excited to see what George Karlaftis looks like. He was a player that, I thought he was better than the 30th player in the draft class. High motor, refined when it comes to using his hands, powerful, strong guy. So, and then on the other side, Frank Clark, Carlos Dunlap, that's an interesting 1-2. I think Chris Jones is an absolute animal on the inside, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the game. As close as it gets to Aaron Donald without being Aaron Donald, really him and Cam Hayward are the next tier. Grady Jarrett maybe in there as well. And then you get to the linebackers, and I'm really excited about, Nick Bolton, Willie Gay Jr. going into their second and third year respectively. I'm hoping to see continued growth out of those two. Also, you add Leo Chenal, third-round pick who's really good as a blitzer. How does Spagnuolo use him? I'm fascinated there. Then you get to the secondary, and there's like a lot of pieces I like. So, talking about Spags, he's somehow made Rashad Fenton one of the, better, when you look at Pro Football Focus grades, like one of the better grading corners just because he fits what Spags wants. Man press, go jam guys to the line of scrimmage. And Fenton's been able to do that at a pretty high level. Now, I don't think Rashad Fenton's anything to write home about as a coverage player, but he fits what Spags wants. So what does that other corner position look like? Is Trent McDuffie going to be the Tyrann Mathieu replacement, smooth mover, you're using him in zone coverage and, rotating from, maybe a safety spot down in the box and just kind of letting him have free reign? Or is he going to be moved out to corners, a little small compared to maybe the corners that Spags has favored in the past, and also a little bit shorter arms? So how's that man press ability come into play? That's interesting. Then also the safety rotation. So if McDuffie is a safety, you have Juan Thornhill, you have Justin Reeder, we'll talk about later on. Who's going to be that nickel backer like Dan Sorensen was? And then again, who's going to be Tyrann Mathieu? Who's that other corner opposite of Rashad Fenton? Is L'Jarius Sneed? He's kind of this. He's a nickel corner. That's where he plays his best. But he has the outside corner body at like 6'2". So can they try again to shift him outside? Because that would be a huge add of value there, and you can figure out that nickel spot from that point onward. But if not, then, again, outside boundary corner number 2 is still looking like something that needs an answer to it. So all in all, solid roster, and you move on from Tyreek Hill, and because of that, you're still getting Sky Moore in the second round. You're adding a George Karlaftis, and it frees up the money to be able to go out and get a Justin Reed. That also comes after letting Tyrann Mathieu walk. So this team's had a little bit of a restructure, and they've had to use their assets maybe a little bit more wisely. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to put it, but trading one player to gain more assets, and then you have to maximize the value of that, of course. But then also, instead of paying, ultimately Tyrann Mathieu only gets like 13 a year, but would you rather pay that or 10 to, Justin Reed? And those are kind of the decisions you have to make when you're paying. Patrick Mahomes has such a team-friendly deal, it's unbelievable, but he's still a big cap hit. So you're still having to try to work through those hoops and have to do some cap gymnastics, if you will, to make it all work and come together. I'm also, of course, Andy Reid's one of the best head coaches in the league, and Spagnuolo, been a long time DC and former head coach. He's widely, respected across the league. And then Eric Bieniemy, one of these days, I'm thinking he's going to become a head coach. I'd like to see it. But if until then, one of the best offensive coordinators, and him and Reid have a, I know they've had their, bumps along the way, and there's been reports of some frustration between the two, but work with somebody for 5 years and you will have similar experiences. So I still think that's a great tandem there, calling the plays offensively. Moving on now, realistic and reach goal are what they sound like. So realistic goal, of course, return to the playoffs. Not much needs to be said there. Reach goal, I'd like to see that offense return to dominance, and then this kind of goes to where maybe, hey, we don't have that, one play bomb at the, snap of a finger with Tyreek Hill. So because defenses are, playing a lot of too high and trying to keep the ball in front of them, let's just become an offense that can work with 8 to 10 play drives and become really efficient that way. And then once, defense has to respect that and understand that we can do that, that opens up, MVS, Sky Moore as deep threats too. So I just like to see this offense get back on track. And, this is kind of the always growing, frustration of maybe being a head coach like an Andy Reid and an offensive mind like that, but also a quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. Like, you show that you can be dominant and you can be one of the best in the game, and then defenses adjust. Or even if you're a defensive player, offenses adjust, So it's this nonstop chess match. Okay, you were dominant for 2 years. Now we're going to make you beat us in a different way. And if Patrick Mahomes does that, it's just another step along the way of solidifying his legacy as one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever do it. But obviously that's big time for the Chiefs trying to, gain another Super Bowl during the Mahomes era. So I like to see that offense, it may look a little different, but I like to see them be back, top of the league when it comes to, passing yards per game, EPA, whatever stat you care about the most. I like to see the Chiefs, top 5 in the league once again. And then, of course, win the Super Bowl. A couple handful of teams in the league that I think legitimately can win a Super Bowl. Kansas City is certainly one of them, so that should definitely be their reach goal. So now moving on to some X factors. So Sky Moore, of course, we're going to talk about him here, the man on your screen, second round pick, and he's not necessarily, one-to-one replacing Tyreek Hill, but has a lot of those similar skill sets, and a player that coming from a smaller school, a little bit smaller in and of itself in his stature, but man, I was high on him, and a ton of people within the draft community were like, Sky Moore should be in the conversation for a late first-round pick, and If the Packers, took him there in the late first, I wouldn't have been surprised. The Chiefs did that with 29 and 30 back when they had that. I would have bought that. So totally saw him as a potential first-round pick, and they get him where they did, the middle to back half of the second round, great value there. But just a guy who has downfield speed, ran in the 4.4s, and despite his size, massive hands, and you kind of see that on tape as well, just really secure when it comes to bringing in the football. Now again, Western Michigan, lower level of competition, smooth route runner though, and I think can win at all three levels. I think he's twitchy after the catch, which again, going back to what I talked about earlier with him and Juju, I think that's a very valuable add to this offense. If you're not going to have the downfield weapon, you got to have, got to force DBs and corners and safeties alike to make plays and tackle Sky Moores and Juju Smith-Schuster's of the world. So I think it's a valuable add, but also because he is a smooth route runner and quick out of his breaks, I think there's some potential there over the intermediate parts of the field, that 10 to 20 yard range between the hashes. And of course, he has the speed to be a deep threat. So guy going at all three levels. What role does he have, right now for Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy? That remains to be seen. But I'm excited about his potential. And again, you lose a superstar in Tyreek Hill, but you look at that wide receiver room, Sky Moore included, it just feels more well-balanced, more well-rounded. You can win in a variety of ways, which has got to be exciting if you're a Chiefs fan. So then moving on to Carlos Dunlap, actually somebody who had like a low 70s run defense grade. And you look at the Chargers adding a Khalil Mack, who you think of Khalil Mack as a pass rusher. And, Carlos Dunlap's had, decade-plus long career. And, he's had some, big-time pass rush wins and had some big years where he's had a lot of sacks. But kind of thinking of him also as someone who can set the edge, kind of like the Chargers did with Khalil Mack, and adding someone who can, be a factor in the run game. That's kind of an interesting component and an overlooked element to that addition, but also just a guy where if Frank Clark's disappointing, you have somebody who at one time was a double-digit sack year in and year out in and around that mark. So some added pass rush depth, definitely a big win there. And Frank Clark, still somebody who not everybody thinks he should be on the roster given the money he makes. I know that's changed a little bit, restructures, but nonetheless, he's been a little bit of a disappointment during his time in Kansas City. So it's nice to have another option. And of course, this is all playing opposite of George Karlaftis, which first round pick, you like to see him hit the ground running pretty early on. And of course, if the edges are working, it makes Chris Jones' life that much easier. So Carlos Dunlap kind of has this rub-off effect across everybody else on that defensive line. And then we get to Justin Reid. So some of his best years in Houston, he was primarily playing, deep safety, free safety role. And I want to know if that's going to be something similar, because I look at Juan Thornhill and I think Kansas City's already got that guy who could be a deep safety. Now maybe it's more, cover two and you're playing a lot of split safety. I think Reid, Thornhill, that makes sense. That works. But what I'm kind of excited about with Justin Reid is, maybe the dip in his production and quality of play wasn't necessarily a change from free to strong safety, but just because Houston was bad and there was not a whole lot of motivating factors. It was clearly a team heading towards a rebuild. And as a player, that can be difficult. So now in a very different environment, right? You're going from a very bad team to a team that could be in the conversation and competing for a Super Bowl. How does that change, his mindset and, his on-field production overall? But again, maybe he's the most likely candidate to be that Dan Sorensen dime backer. So, if Juan Thornhill's somebody who's going to be, and you also draft Brian Cook from Cincinnati in the second or third round, day 2 of the draft. That's another guy with a lot of speed, a lot of range. That feels like somebody in the mold of a Juan Thornhill you want deep as a coverage safety. So again, it just kind of makes me think that they might be trying to use Justin Reid as, that dime back or somebody they could put in the box, which again kind of makes me interested in how they're going to use Trent McDuffie, because I'm kind of envisioning something similar there. So tons of questions I need answered when it comes to the alignment of that Chiefs defense and the roles these guys play. But realistically, it's probably best if I don't have a defined role, because that having movable chess pieces and versatility is really the way to keep offenses guessing, and that's where you'll generate turnover. So hopefully that's what we'll see from Kansas City this year. I think Justin Reid can do a lot of different things to maybe enable that type of flexibility, versatility defensively. So then games to watch, we'll get you out of here. Common thread, these are all really good opponents. Week 4 at Tampa Bay, and also just for reference, I don't include division games in my games to watch because duh, and especially when you play in maybe the most talented division in NFL history in the AFC West this year. Yeah, anytime they play the Raiders, Chargers, and the Broncos, if you're a Chiefs fan or just an NFL fan, please watch those games. So week 4 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is Sunday Night Football, so these national primetime games weigh heavily on national rhetoric, especially for two teams that are in that Super Bowl conversation. So, the Chiefs or the Bucs come out flat, that's going to, fuel the fire of how teams discuss Tampa and Kansas City for the weeks to come. So, of course, big-time matchup there, but also a Super Bowl rematch, so don't need to talk about this. These are two of the best teams in the league. So, yeah, big-time game to watch there. And, one that, I'm going to be doing power rankings once we get in the regular season. depending on that game, there's a potential big rise, quote unquote big rise for one of these two teams, maybe moving up to the number 1 spot, and also like a pretty decent fall. Maybe if I have Kansas City at 7, maybe they fall down to 10 or something like that. We'll see once we get to week 4, but just for rhetoric's sake. But week 7 then against San Francisco, and this is kind of where how does Carlos Dunlap as an edge setter come into play here. But really, Kansas City has not necessarily been one of the best defenses in the league when it comes to stopping the run. So how does that matchup play out against San Francisco? That being said, I think they can be improved. Again, Carlos Dunlap, year 2 for Nick Bolton, and year 3 for Willie Gay Jr., Justin Reed, Trent McDuffie. These guys you can play in the box and are smooth movers. Reed in specific can lay the boom as well. So there's some added pieces there. And again, that kind of goes back to the Tyreek Hill trade where it's like, hey, we may lose a huge plus, but it allows us to get minor upgrades and little pluses around the rest of the roster, and overall that might make us a better team. So that's just gonna be an interesting matchup. I want to see how that Shanahan run game on the offensive side matches up against Kansas City's run defense. And then when it comes to winning through the air, does Trey Lance what does he look like against a secondary that I like the safeties, but the quarterback position is a little flawed. So how did the Chiefs secondary hold up against Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Trey Lance, and George Kittle, of course. And then week 13 at the Cincinnati Bengals. These Chiefs-Bengals games last year were awesome. So, of course, this is a great game to watch in Cincinnati, which adds another layer of intrigue. Kansas City having to go to Cincy and try to take down potentially a team that they're competing for, not only like seeding 1 through 4, but the Bengals and the Chiefs. There's a world where those two teams are competing for the number 1 seed. So, a lot of playoff implications there on the line for the Bengals-Chiefs matchup, but also two teams that, hey, maybe the Chargers do in the AFC West, and I got the Ravens winning the AFC North. This could be seeding for spots 5 through 7 in the wild card too, which, if the Bengals and the Chiefs are wild card teams, that really speaks to how unbelievable the AFC is going to be next year. So a couple of different hypotheticals to think about there. Obviously, a lot of playoff implications, but also two teams that gave us awesome games last year, so I'm going to be watching those games this year. But that's going to do it for my Kansas City Chiefs season preview video. Tell me what you think about the Chiefs down below in the comment section. How many wins do you think they come away with? Who are some X factors, not superstars, please, but X factors for this team this year, and some games you're looking forward to watching the Chiefs play this upcoming season? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about Kansas City down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teej. I'm signing off.